The government would rather not have to talk about this, because if its back is against the wall, of course it's going to have to acknowledge that forced labor occurs, and of course it's going to have to condemn it. But it doesn't want to do so publicly because it is trying at the same time to expand economic relations with the government of China.
This should make liberal voters skin crawl. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about somebody that a few of you may know. You may have heard what he has said. You may have watched our videos on what he has said. Of course, we're talking about Mr. Michael Ma. Okay. Well, one of the first things that we've been hearing speculation about Michael Ma is not on the Liberal website anymore. And this has led to a lot of reposts of this, and has led to a lot of questions, and legitimate questions, because why isn't he on the Liberal website? But we looked into this. I actually had posted a short on Facebook and on X on Friday, I believe.
I think it was Friday, because we were here at home.
And
it was Friday night.
And it was questioning this exact thing. But it was up for probably 90 seconds. And then I took it
definitely
down.
Less than 5 minutes. I don't know about as short as 90 seconds, but definitely less than 5 minutes.
It was pretty short.
It was pretty quick that we took it back down.
Because we ended up coming across some new information. So let's just stop pitter-pattering around it. Has Michael Ma been removed from the Liberal website? No. Is he on the Liberal website? Also no. Ryan, what are you talking about? Well, ladies and gentlemen, here you go. So, if you look on the Wayback Machine, which we did, and we looked back to February of this year, Michael Ma is not on the Liberal website. Where should Michael Ma be? Michael Ma should be either between Michael Croteau and Mike Kellaway, or between Mike Kellaway and Mona Fortier. He is not there. So, ladies and gentlemen, Michael Ma was never on the Liberal website to begin with. Now, in addition to this, check this out. This is where Matt Genereux should be. Matt Genereux should be between Mark Gerritsen and Melanie Joly. He is not there. Who else isn't there? Lori Idlout. Lori Idlout should be between Lisa Hepner and Louis Villeneuve. The only person that is up there is Chris D'Entremont.
And he was the first one that crossed back in, what was it, September or October?
Right.
Yeah.
So, while there is legitimate questions of whether or not Michael Ma will be removed from caucus, those are fair. The postulation that because he's not on the Liberal website as being an indicator that he may be removed from caucus, I wouldn't advise people to take that into your fact tool belt, because he never was actually on the Liberal website. So, want to put that out there. There's another reason why we're fairly confident that at this point, Michael Ma is not going to be removed from caucus. Why? Well, something's coming up that's kind of in conflict with that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're doing nothing at around 5:30 p.m. and you have $1,775 just burning a hole in your pocket that you would rather see lit on fire and given to the Liberals, you have the option of going to an evening with Mark Carney. So that's tomorrow, March 30th, 5:30 p.m. Again, if you're doing nothing.
Well, you can't anymore because the signups were done today at 5 o'clock.
Oh.
So sorry, guys. Sorry to burst your bubble, but yeah.
Sorry. If you were youth age 35 and under, so apparently you're youth up to 34, or actually up to 35, I guess, you only had to pay $925. And this was going to be at Angus Glen Golf Club Limited, 10080 Kennedy Road, Markham, Ontario. Join us for a unique in-person event. Okay, fine. So, Mark Carney's going to be there. Yay! Leader of the Liberal Party, hosted by Gary Anandasangri, MP, Scarborough. What an amazing event to go to.
You know, they could not pay me $1,775 to be in the same room as those two.
But ladies and gentlemen, Gary is not the only host. Who else is hosting this, you may ask? Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Mom, MP from Markham, Unionville, and also hosted by his good buddy and his recruiter into the Liberal Party, Tim Hodgson, MP for Markham, Thornhill. Okay, so this is what this all looks like right now. So Mark Carney, right after this complete gaffe by Michael Baugh, is going to a fundraiser where they're charging $1,700.
That's the maximum amount that you can donate to a political party
in a year.
For the year. And they do increase it by $25 every year. So that's the maximum for 2026.
So they're charging people that much to attend an event that is co-hosted by Mr. Forced Labor himself, Michael Ma. I don't know if that's a wise idea. Now, it's possible that they were told to remove Michael Ma from that event on the Liberal website, which means it's equally possible that it will take the same amount of time to remove that from the Liberal website as it would to actually get Michael Ma's picture onto the Liberal website.
But I guess we'll find out tomorrow night through the media.
I guess so. Because it's taken over 4 months to actually get him onto the Liberal website. So maybe they'll finally get around to removing his name from that fundraiser 4 months from now. This is not going to be a great look for Mark Carney, let me tell you that. They may tell Michael Ma to not go to the event, which would be strange because a host that doesn't show up to an event when they're advertised to be there, you know, as part of that reason to go there. I don't even know what to say, folks. But based on this looks terrible on Mark Carney to go from Michael Ma blowing up all over social media, as well as on mainstream media, and in even Bob Fife. Credit where credit's due. Bob Fife is asking the question, does Mark Carney care about human rights anymore? Because
it's more efficient not to.
Yeah, apparently it's more efficient not to. So it looks terrible.
Yeah.
Looks absolutely terrible. And there were some folks in chat saying, I hope Michael Ma doesn't get kicked from caucus. Well, it's possible that he may not. And
well, I mean, if you look at how long it took Carney to come out and say something negative against Paul Chang, it was a couple days. And then I think Paul actually resigned on his own, because remember we had that website. What was the URL? Do you remember?
WillPaulChangBeFired.com.
Yeah, and he wasn't actually fired. He stepped down.
Yeah. Well, Scott Reed went on CTV and gave his thoughts, and he doesn't think that Mr. Ma is going to be removed from caucus either.
So Michael Ma has apologized for his comments on forced labor in China. But how does this reflect on the Liberal caucus? How serious is this?
Well, this is two kinds of trouble for the Prime Minister, both unwelcome and both self-inflicted from Mr. Ma. On the one hand, it puts, a real harsh spotlight on the fact that if you're going to increase trade and economic relations with China, as Canada is doing, as we must presumably, because the United States is withdrawing and, putting up tariffs. Well, if you're going to increase those relations with China, then you're going to be asked to account for the fact that the CCP are not good actors. There is forced labor. There are all sorts of human abuses. There is an ongoing and persistent cybersecurity threat that comes from China. And so those uncomfortable realities were brought harshly into light by Mr. Ma. And the second problem is that Mr. Ma himself was, of course, a high-profile steal from the Conservatives. And now there's some rust on that very high-profile political victory.
Talk to us about Energy Minister Tim Hodgson saying that, yes, the federal government is opposed to forced labor, and also deferring questions to Carney on whether Ma should remain in the Liberal caucus.
Yeah, those questions will always get deflected to the leader or to the prime minister, because cabinet ministers, senior critics for an opposition leader, they leave questions of whether a member should be included or not included in caucus to the leader. So I think that's just a kind of what we call a boring process answer. And Hodgson, for his part, when flushed out on the question forced labor, of course, condemns it. But the nuance here is this: the government would rather not have to talk about this, because if its back is against the wall, of course it's going to have to acknowledge that forced labor occurs, and of course it's going to have to condemn it. But it doesn't want to do so publicly, because it is trying at the same time to expand economic relations with the government of China. That's not particularly glorious. That's not, particularly edifying, but that's the political and economic reality that Canada finds itself in. And Mr. Ma has forced the Prime Minister and senior ministers like Minister Hodgson to talk about this directly and put them between a rock and a hard place.
How does the fact that the Liberals are on the verge of a majority factor into whatever decision Carney makes as he faces questions about whether Ma should remain in the Liberal caucus?
Yeah, he's going to remain in the Liberal caucus. The math makes that an absolute certainty.
I was actually quite surprised that Mr. Reid said a lot of that. So what he said out loud is, well, Carney's trying to do business with China, so they don't want to talk about this. They don't want to talk about forced labor. They don't want to talk about any of this. And this should make Liberal voters skin crawl hearing that. Because what he is saying, he's saying that because we, according to Mark Carney, we need to deal with China, we are willing to ignore and not acknowledge and hold our noses about all of the human rights violations that are going on over in China, of all the slavery that's going on in China. That's what forced labor means. Forced labor is the nicer way of saying slavery. And they would just rather not deal with it. That is a disgusting position to be in. And this is where, he says, this is where Canada finds itself in. No, this is the position that Mark Carney finds himself in. Canada didn't choose this. Mark Carney chose this. And this is why you have the Liberals in committee trying to say, well, we don't want to say that the committee condemns forced labor in China. We'll just say that we condemn it globally. And that's what Michael Ma is saying as well. Well, I condemn it everywhere. Well, how do you know it's everywhere? Have you seen it? Yes or no, please. But he hasn't answered that question. So that's interesting. And the numerical reality of this majority government makes him have to keep Ma as well. And Mark Carney desperately wants that majority. So he's willing to take that poison pill and keep it in his party.
Well, and that's the thing. If he keeps Ma and gets a majority, then, okay, they've got government for the next 3 years. And after that, then maybe they're in trouble. But, that's a problem for tomorrow's Mark Carney. You know what I mean?
I guess. But again, fragile majority. So it's very possible that this doesn't last. But this is starting to raise a lot of different questions, right, about Mark Carney. He's not that friendly and, sweet little old man that people are thinking he is, if he's willing to ignore slavery going on over in China. And the witness herself, Margaret McQuaid Johnson, had said, listen, we can't just ignore forced labor and forced labor, included products that come into Canada that could come into the United States, because otherwise we face a 25% tariff across the board. And that's because the United States has a very, very firm so should we, but have a very firm stance on forced labor and slavery that leads to products that are manufactured that come over into North America. And that's the biggest question on this. But it leads to the other questions that Bob Fife and others have raised. Why have we decided to lay off virtually all of the people that are assigned to actually detect forced labor products coming into this country? Why are we doing that? It's a great question, Mark Carney. Canadians would like some answers.
Well, and we were talking about this at my sister's place. It's like if you have really strict laws against speeding, but no officers to police those laws, then, well, everybody gets away with it.
Now, breaking news, China has denied that there's forced labor in China.
You don't say.
Canadian press, China denies forced labor allegations amid fallout from Michael Ma's comments. China is again denying claims of forced labor in the country as calls grow for Prime Minister Mark Carney to clarify Canada's stance on the issue amid fallout from comments made by Liberal MP Michael Ma that appeared to cast doubt on reported human rights abuses. The Chinese embassy in Canada pushed back on the allegation that forced labor is used in the production of Chinese vehicle components in a social media post Friday night, calling it a blatant lie that some are using to undermine the Canada-China EV deal. Comments from the embassy came a day after Ma apologized for a tense exchange during a committee hearing where he asked an expert if she'd seen forced labor in China with her own eyes or if she'd rely on quote-unquote hearsay. Margaret McQuaig-Johnson, a senior fellow at the University of Ottawa, had told committee members that Chinese vehicles are made with products of slave labor performed by members of the Uyghur minority, referring to research by Human Rights Watch. On Friday, Tim Hodgson said Canada was in the process of recalibrating its relationship with China. While he acknowledged the two countries have had differences, he said those disagreements, and the bilateral conversations about them, don't need to be made public. Quote, "We will not allow for products done with forced labor into this country. They understand that. They understand what our lines are. And so we're focused on where we do agree," end quote, Hodgson said. Quote, "Those lines are clear. We don't need to have public discussions about where we disagree. We make that clear to our friends in China," end quote.
Wow.
So, why is it that the United States has stopped thousands of shipments because they had identified them as being made with forced labor, and Canada has stopped one?
Because we laid off everybody who was responsible for that?
We have a habit of this number one, right? Because one is the number of IRGC people that we've actually expelled from this country as well, despite there being allegedly 700 of them. But make no mistake, this is a problem for Mark Carney, because on one hand, he's going to have a lot of pressure come on him at home regarding Michael Ma's comments, regarding Michael Ma's stance that he made, in my opinion, quite clear to Ms. McQuaig-Johnson after the committee meeting. And two, he's not really allowed to talk badly about China, because that can jeopardize this relationship that he has, and dare I say maybe jeopardize the relationship between China and a little company called Brookfield. So Xi Jinping may not take too kindly to the Liberals casting aspersions at China, just like Xi Jinping wasn't too happy when Trudeau did it. So this is a fantastic pickle that Mark Carney is actually in, and he made this situation come to fruition all by himself. So, in my opinion, folks, it's letter writing time. It's constituency office calling time. Not your own if you have a conservative MP, but, you know, send them a letter too that you are not happy with what is going on with this relationship with China and the Liberal position on forced labor and slave labor in this country. But I'm sure the Liberal MP offices around this country would love to hear from you on this. And they're going to hear from us as well. So it's our responsibility as Canadians to let our government know what we do and do not agree with them on. And unlike Mr. Hodgson, I think it is time to make that public. and let the Liberals know exactly where Canadians stand. So I think they're in some trouble here, and I don't think this is going to go away, especially if they keep Michael Maw around. Which Carney he's in an impossible position. He has to give up that majority. But here's the thing, and this goes back to everyone's comments about Michael Maw crossing in the first place. Well, Mark Carney, why don't you just have Michael Maw resign his seat and then go to an election and see if Canadians will pick a Liberal in that by-election? Because Michael Maw seemed very confident with all of the tens of thousands of conversations he must have had with folks in his riding when he was considering whether or not to cross the floor. So what are you worried about, Mark Carney? What's one more by-election to secure your Liberal majority?